What is going on YouTube? Running on Sports back here with another video. Today is our weekly college football news update. Don't got a lot of recruiting news to talk about, but we have a lot of other news to talk about, some huge news, and I'm sure that almost everyone watching this video has heard about it, and so we're here to talk about it, give you our thoughts, and break down what may happen. And I'm not going to foreshadow anything because we'll get there when we get there, but with that being said, if you have not already, please leave a like down below, subscribe, share this with your friends, and please follow our social media pages at runningun_sports on Instagram and at runningunsports on TikTok, and be the first to know when we post. When you follow those accounts, we post immediately when these videos go public on YouTube. So that would be a lot. It would mean a lot if you guys could all go and follow our social media pages. And with that being said, let's get right into the video. Four-star running back Branson Robinson commits to the University of Georgia. A huge pickup for Georgia. Georgia's had some great running back talent. Sony Michel, Todd Gurley, and Nick Chubb, of course, and lot more. And but a very good pickup. Branson Robinson, one of the most athletic players in his class and one of the most athletic football players right now in all of the country. He holds the record for track at that in the state of Missouri. He holds a track record, and he's a great football player as well. He's a huge dude, and holding state track records is also very impressive. And he's big, fast, and he's going to be a very good addition to that Georgia Bulldogs team. And I'm actually really excited to see what he'll do there. And Kirby Smart's produced a lot of very good running backs lately, so I'm excited to see how that goes, and will be a lot of fun to watch. Four-star defensive lineman Danny Dennis Sutton has committed to Penn State. Four-star defensive lineman Caden Curry announces his top 5 schools: Alabama, Oregon, Indiana, Clemson, and Ohio State. Four-star athlete Azaria Thomas announces his top 3 schools: Georgia Tech, Florida, and LSU. We talked about him last week. Four-star running back Damari Alston commits to Auburn. Four-star linebacker Sean Murphy commits to Alabama. Four-star defensive lineman Christian Miller announces his top 4 schools: Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, and USC. Four-star tight end Mac Markey commits to Florida. So that's all that we have for recruiting news right now. But now we're going to talk about some other news that's been surrounding the college football world. I'm sure you've heard about it if you pay any attention to college football, and that is the Oklahoma Sooners and the Texas Longhorns wanting to join the Southeastern Conference. And I think that there's been a lot of different stuff going on just in this past week. The news came out a week ago today, really, when I dropped our last video. When I published that video, was just about right after I published it, was the news that Texas and Oklahoma have both, been trying to, they want to be in the Southeastern Conference. And there's been a whole whirlwind of stuff surrounding that, and just within a week. And they have serious inquiries about joining the Southeastern Conference. They've been in contact with the SEC, and they've informed, just of yesterday, July 26th, I believe, they just informed the Big 12 that they will be departing the conference and will no longer be a part of the conference. And so now they will have a meeting with their athletic directors for Texas, and both Texas and Oklahoma, their athletic directors, and they will have a meeting about it, and then they'll figure out whether they'll join or not. And that'll be a very interesting meeting. Could change college football for a very long time, honestly. And so that's going to be interesting to see how the meeting goes, really. And I think that we'll see what happens there. I don't really have any prediction there, but I really think that most likely this deal will happen with Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC. So that's a very possible thing right now. They're leaving, and so they've applied to join the SEC. The SEC presidents will vote, and then they'll figure out on probably Friday. I will figure out whether these teams are will be in the SEC next year, and I think that that's gonna be interesting to see. But my overall thoughts on it is obviously we all know why Texas and Oklahoma want to join the Southeastern Conference because the SEC has the best competition, the best level of play, and the biggest spotlight for sure. There's no argument. Most of the times, your biggest games of the week are the 12:30 CBS games, 12:30, 3:30, depending where you live. But the 12:30 Pacific time CBS games, SEC games, a lot of the time that is the biggest game of the week. And Oklahoma and Texas will are normally playing at 9 in the morning Pacific time and 11 in the morning Central time, where most of those universities are located at. And I think that that's not the best spotlight. 11 in the morning, not a lot of people there. I watch college football at 11 in the morning, but not everyone watches as much as a lot. Not everyone watches the equal amount of college football that I do, and people have things to do during the day, and not that many people will be watching college football in the middle of the day, but at night there'll be you know there'll be a lot better games, and in the SEC there's just more competition where people will want to watch Alabama play Ole Miss, Georgia and Florida. Just you could go on naming the matchups that are entertaining, and whether it is like Alabama and LSU are in a situation where obviously this year was a lopsided matchup. Alabama destroyed LSU, but at the same time, it was still an entertaining game because it was a lot of fun to see Alabama get their revenge back from last season, and it's just the deep tradition of those programs and the rivalries of those programs are just so fun to watch, and you don't have that in the Big 12 as much at all. And I don't think there's any, obviously people are going to say that Oklahoma and Texas want to jump on the bandwagon, but I don't blame them because what happens is that, you get more money obviously for your programs, you get more exposure, your players that these teams Alabama and Auburn and LSU and Georgia and Florida and all the other SEC powerhouse teams, those players that they get from your literal backyard. Mostly Texas, Oklahoma isn't the most talented high school football state as much as Texas is, but either way, those players are going to have more of a chance to come to your program, and if you have more great five-star athlete players coming to your country and coming to your college and coming to your program, you're going to have more success, obviously. And so that's why they want to be on that. They want them to have the biggest spotlight. And if you go to a five-star running back in Texas and say, "Hey, do you want to play at on primetime games every night in the SEC, or do you want to play in the middle of the day in the Big 12 and not play as good as teams and not really have a chance to win a to win a to make the national championship?" And I think that obviously you're going to want to play with better competition, more exposure for trying to get to the next level, of course. And now with this whole name, image, and likeness, the NIL, they have even more of a chance to want to get more exposure and more, sponsorship opportunities because these guys can make money now. I don't think it's almost like the NFL in a way where, if there's a company out there and they see this guy, a good football player, they can approach him and make a deal. I mean, we just talked about last week, Bryce Young already almost seven figures said by Nick Saban. That's insane. I mean, the guy's 20 years old, I believe. And so, it's college football. Yes, it's college, but it is a business at the end of the day, and there's no denying the fact of that. And, I think that in the end, my overall thoughts are that I think that Texas is going to benefit more from this. Texas is going to have better future teams, and I think because of Steve Sarkisian mainly, but at the same time because their Oklahoma is has the best team right now that they might have in maybe 10, 20 years. They have a very good team right now, and I think that they after this year they lose a lot of players, and we haven't seen Lincoln Riley have to go through a whole rebuild. When Kyler Murray was on that team, he had a lot of these guys in the backup situation, and I think that we'll find out how good of a coach Lincoln Riley truthfully is and how good of a recruiter he is this year. And yes, they'll have a good team, probably make a run in their conference, depending on what conference it is. If it's the SEC, then I don't really think they have a chance. Oklahoma does. I just don't see it happening for Oklahoma. I just think that these SEC teams just recruit a lot better than they do. And Malachi Nelson, their probably next starting quarterback after Spencer Rattler leaves, is a good player, but he is not Spencer Rattler at the same time. And no knock to Malachi Nelson, but Spencer Rattler is a special talent, and he's a once in a lifetime player. And I just think that that we'll see how good Oklahoma's program really is, and I think that Texas is really has a good recruiting program. They have some good young players right now with some veterans that have been around for a while, some seniors that are very good. And then they have Steve Sarkisian, a very effective recruiter, as we saw at Alabama. And I think that, so at the end of the day, if Texas could fit right in with the SEC, no doubt in my mind. Oklahoma, after this year, I don't know. I just don't know how well that will go. But more money for the teams at the end of the day, maybe more draw to recruits, and we'll see what happens with that. And so, just talking about some alignments of the SEC, if these trades, or not trades, but this expansion goes through, I think that a lot of people really need to calm down in the sense that there's not, like, a lot of people think that there's gonna be all these super conferences. It's gonna be like just one super good conference, and the rest of the conferences aren't gonna be good. Which I don't think that's true. We've seen teams move. We saw Texas A&M join the SEC not too long ago, and so I don't think that that's really the case at all. I truthfully don't. But I think that there'll be some alignment differently than there was obviously this year, but it won't be in the shape of super conferences and more conferences and some teams. I just don't see that happening at all. And I think that a lot of it is overhyping the news. And I think that what we'll see is some teams joining the SEC and maybe some leaving the SEC, but I don't think we'll see very much more than that. The SEC just has a drawn appeal to college football fans that other conferences like the Big 12 and the Big 10, the Pac 12, and really the ACC doesn't have to offer, because the ACC, Clemson can play the worst 10 teams and could play teams that would be the worst team in the SEC, every single one of them, and they're going to be undefeated, obviously. So no one wants to watch Clemson beat Wake Forest every Saturday night on ESPN. That's just not a appealing game to anyone at all. And so I think that that will really sort itself out in a sense. And the Clemson, if they want to play against better teams, which I don't think they do, just considering the fact that they haven't scheduled besides this year versus Georgia in this week 1 game, which I think they'll lose. I think that Clemson just, we've seen it before, and that also with Ohio State, once they get to the big dogs, it's a different story. And when you have teams in the SEC who play legit teams every single week, they're going to be a whole lot better. And I think that that just proves the case for the SEC big time. And why wouldn't you want to go there? So, talking about some realignments, if you will, uh, if this is my prediction for if Texas and Oklahoma join, and no one leaves. I think that we'll have in the Eastern Division, we'll have Georgia, Florida, Missouri, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and Alabama and Auburn will join the East Division of the SEC, and we'll see how it is. I mean, just geographically, would make the most sense, and so we'll see if that is how it goes. And then in the West would be Texas A&M, LSU, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Texas, and Oklahoma. Again, just really mostly because it works geographically, but I think that that would make it the most even way. Or they could just add a team to the East and a team to the West, whether it's Texas going to the Eastern Division and Oklahoma going to the Western Division. Either way, it it'll make sense. But there's been talk of what are called pods. This was released by 24/7. 4 team pods. Each team, you play the other 3 teams in your pod each season. You play 2 games against each of the other pods, and host every team in the conference at least once every 4 seasons. So looking at this is how 24/7 Sports has it aligned as a hypothetical SEC alignment if Texas and Oklahoma join the conference. In Pod A, Florida and Georgia, and Kentucky and South Carolina. Pod B, Alabama and Auburn, and Tennessee and Vanderbilt. Pod C, LSU and Mississippi State, and Ole Miss and Texas A&M, and then the final Pod D, Arkansas and Missouri, and Oklahoma and Texas. And I think that what will happen is, this is my personal prediction of what I want to see happen and what could happen, but most likely I don't know. I don't think it will happen, but this is what I'd like to see. I'd like to see Texas and Oklahoma join, and I'd like to see Missouri and Vanderbilt leave. Both those teams are just non-factors, and they're cupcakes to any legit to any legit SEC team out there, and I think that they're just kind of a waste. And no one watches Vanderbilt and Missouri play, and that's just the truth. Sorry if you're a Vanderbilt Missouri fan, but I'm just calling it how it is because it's truthfully how it is. And so a lot of people think that the Big 12 will split up, and I think that that won't happen at all. I think that some teams may join it, but I don't think that they'll split up and the conference will just go. But 24/7 Sports released this as well. Potential Big 12 landing spots if Texas and Oklahoma are to leave. They have Baylor going to the the American Athletic Conference, which would make sense. And it's in the area. There's a couple teams from Texas, Houston, and I believe SMU are both in that conference, so makes somewhat of sense. Iowa State and Kansas going to the Big Ten would make somewhat of sense, and they're kind of in the area. There's some teams around there that are in that conference, so it might make sense. But I don't think that any of this will happen. But if it were to happen, this is like what I think would make sense, and what wouldn't make sense. They have Kansas State joining the Mountain West, which really to me makes not much sense at all. The Mountain West is, they pride themselves in having both teams in the Pacific and Central, Mountain Time, and so that's not really the area. That's more it's more Mountain Time, but Kansas is a ways out from the rest of those schools in that area. And I think that you look at all the conferences, all the schools for the conferences are very close, and the SEC is all in the southeastern part of the state, obviously. Pac-12 is all on the west coast, so it doesn't really make that much sense. And the closest team to Kansas State would be New Mexico State, or New Mexico, maybe even Wyoming, but that's still a ways out. The 24/7 Sports has Oklahoma State going to Pac-12. That just makes no sense. That's not even on the West Coast. That's just literally Central America. So not Central America, but it's in the central center of the United States. That just makes no sense either. Texas, TCU, that doesn't make any sense either. To the Pac-12, that's in the center of the United States, and that's not what the Pac-12 is. The West Coast Conference, so that would never work. Texas Tech in the American Athletic Conference. This one would make sense, and I think that you know, obviously because of where they are, and I think that they would probably be a powerhouse in that conference. And I don't know if they want to just beat teams that aren't that good, but at the same time, Power Five football and Group of Five football is a lot different, and it's money lost if you join the AAC. So that would be a big loss for both Texas and Baylor if they did, and I just don't see any of those teams leaving, especially Baylor, because they've had some good teams recently. But Texas Tech would actually not surprise me too much about them leaving to the American Athletic Conference, but Baylor, I just don't see that happening. And then they have West Virginia, the final team, leaving to the ACC. And this one actually makes sense. And West Virginia is kind of one of those teams that they've been sneaky good every once in a while. And, I could see them being a team that could give Clemson a run for their money. And I would honestly be down to see that. I think that that would be fun. And, we'll see if that works. And a lot would have to happen for them to join the ACC, and it would take a while, and it would be a very interesting, long process for sure. TCU has reported that Baylor and Texas Tech have reached out to the Pac-12, and that is also shocking news. And it makes no sense because it's not on the west coast of the state. It's a West Coast conference. All the teams are in the West Coast, and so I just don't see that happening at all. I don't think that that would work. And all those teams there are seem to get a lot of their recruits from their hometown, home states, I should say. And TCU would have a lot. TCU, Baylor, and Texas Tech, all three teams in Texas, would have a lot more talent than some of the other teams in the Pac-12. And I don't think that they could hang with USC, but there's some teams that they would beat by a lot. Kansas has set up a call with the Big Ten, so that's another news story. And I could see Kansas going for the Big Ten. They have no real asset to to the Big 12, and they've never been good lately. And so that wouldn't shock me at all if I'm being honest. So moving on now from the whole conference chaos is what I like to call it. Tate Martell's father has confirmed that Tate Martell will attend UNLV for the last 2 years of his eligibility. And we talked about this last week as a legit possibility, and here it is. It happens. And I think that it will be interesting to see what Tate Martell does at UNLV, whether he plays quarterback or whether he plays wide receiver. And he was playing a little bit of slot receiver at Miami, and from the Las Vegas area, so it makes a lot of sense. But a guy that just I can't help but compare him to is Malik Henry from the Netflix show Last Chance U. A guy who really had a ton of talent. Malik Henry, arguably the best quarterback coming out of high school in his class. And, he had a lot of talent and really just fell off in college big time. Malik Henry kicked out of college, then sent to Independence Community College, as you most likely saw in the Netflix show Last Chance U. And, I think that those guys just struggled to, focus at the next level. And I don't know if it's because they let it get to their head or whether it was too much pressure. And I think that that was truthfully the case for Malik Henry. It was just too much for him. But Tate Martell is a totally different story because that guy never lost a game in his high school football career, and he made it look easy. And so I don't know. I just don't think he had the focus to be a Division I college football quarterback, and going to Ohio State was probably not the best choice for him considering the stacked quarterback room they had at the time, and just really unfortunate to see talent wasted, and it's just sad to see. So that will wrap it up for today's video. If you guys have not already, please leave a like down below, subscribe, share this with your friends. Have a great day. Thank you guys so much for watching.